She is simply a mother to Kevin's sons now. I'd want to live with my father, especially because he's normally more understanding. However, he had to relocate for a new job in another city, which paid him substantially more. He pays me occasional visits, but I live with my mother full-time. Dad and I also communicate on the phone frequently. He is aware of some of my concerns with Kevin and his son since I have discussed them with him. He's really supportive and has even attempted to talk to my mother about the matter. I believe he sincerely wants to assist, but whenever he brings it up, my mother shuts him off. She tells him to back off and says he shouldn't meddle with her marriage. Despite everything, I've worked hard over the years to acclimate to life with my new family. I've really tried to make an effort with Kevin and his sons, believing that if I remain patient and transparent, we could develop a nice relationship. Despite my best attempts, I continue to feel invisible within my own family. He and Mom chose the location and reserved tickets and lodgings for all of us. Unfortunately, just a day before our trip, I was involved in a car accident with my mother. We were heading home from shopping for some clothing for our impending vacation when another automobile smashed into us from behind. It wasn't a major collision, but it was enough to throw us off course and cause some injuries. My mother was generally fine, with a few scrapes and bruises here and there, but I wasn't that fortunate. The accident caused me to break my arm and suffer a concussion. The ambulance arrived, and I was quickly brought to the hospital. When Kevin initially learned of our accident, he rushed to the hospital, appearing concerned. At first, I assumed he was really concerned for my and my mother's well-being, and that he had come to see us. But then he kept bringing up the trip, agonizing about whether we'd still be able to travel and worried that the money he'd invested would be wasted. But Kevin rejected the notion almost immediately. He ignored my concerns, calling me foolish for making such a huge deal about small injuries. He dismissed my notion of calling my father, arguing that it would just make him worry more. Kevin felt there was no need to interrupt anybody else's plans over something as minor as a concussion and a fractured arm, which he believed would mend well with a few days of hospital rest. In the end, Kevin's pressure was effective. I stared at my mother, hoping she would hold her ground and insist on staying with me. But, as usual, she caved to Kevin. Instead of battling for what I needed, she decided to go. She only stayed with me for one night, which provided some consolation. I clung to the hope that, after seeing how vulnerable I was, she would realize I needed her presence. But the next day, Kevin arrived at the hospital to bring her up, anxious to embark on the vacation as planned, without regard for how I was doing. I felt abandoned and deceived when my mother left me alone in the hospital. But when my father answered the phone and the nurse told him about my position, he was immediately alarmed. He sounded more concerned than I had heard Dad in a long time and inquired whether my mother had truly gone on the vacation without me. I described everything, including how Kevin insisted on leaving me behind because he didn't want the trip money to go to waste, and how my mother eventually consented. Once I arrived at my father's house, he attempted to contact Mom again. She claimed to have missed his previous calls since she was having so much fun with Kevin and his sons. Hearing this inflamed his rage even more, and he did not hold back. He forcefully told her that her actions were unacceptable, that abandoning me in the hospital was a major act of neglect, and that he intended to take legal action to hold her and Kevin responsible. He even mentioned taking her to court if necessary, which implies she could lose custody of me. He made it apparent that he was ready to report her and Kevin for their activities.